lovely to see you all here today. My name's Alison McKenna. I work in the Southeastern Trust Regional Trauma Network. And with me today, I have Aileen McGuinness, Trauma Informed Practice Implementation Manager in SBNI, and Joanne Minari, who's Consultant Clinical Psychologist in Southern Trust. So thank you all for taking the time to complete this poll on arrival. We're keen to know how far and wide we're reaching, so we're really grateful to you for completing this. And today is...
Are you getting sound? Can you hear her talking? Yeah. Okay. I can hear.
Would you mind muting yourself there, please? There we go. So sorry, I was just saying there, this is the fifth in our series of 6 lunch and learns, all focused on the Safeguarding Board Northern Ireland's trauma-informed organisational toolkit. And today's focus, as you'll see here, is on evaluation and sustainability and working together. The 6th session that will take place in a fortnight will be on the same Zoom link, just to make it easy for you. And this session is recorded. Your mics have been deactivated, but we will take your questions at the end. And this session will be recorded and it will be uploaded to the playlist on YouTube after today. As it's only 40 minutes long, it can only be a very short introduction, but our webinar series offers deeper dives into various subjects related to trauma. So if you would like to receive a copy of the slides, a link to this recording, a certificate for an RCPD and other resources, we would ask you to enter your details in the window that will appear on your screen in just a moment. We do require your name as well as your email address, so please provide both. So if you enter your details on the window that will come up in just a moment, we are only permitted to issue certificates to those who enter their details in the poll or in the chat by 1:10. So I'm sorry if it's later, we're not permitted to send you a certificate. Please do be patient with us in receiving your resources or your certificate because we have a small team, so it takes a wee while to get them all sent out. So please do give us your comments and feedbacks. We have several polls that will come up on your screen at various intervals. They're mostly very short, just a couple of tick boxes, so shouldn't interrupt your viewing. You can also put your comments and questions in the chat, which we'll be monitoring. And all these sessions, all our lunch and learns are co-designed and co-delivered between Health and Social Care and the Victims and Survivors Service. And for this series, we've had a collaboration with Safeguarding Board Northern Ireland, whose toolkit we're trying to showcase. It's a very valuable toolkit, and I have no doubt it will be of great help to you in all your organisations. So I'm just going to pass over to Aileen and Joanne now.
Hello folks, as Alison said, my name's Aileen McGuinness. I'm one of 4 implementation managers working in the Safeguarding Board, and part of our role is to support organisations and government departments to understand what a trauma-informed approach is, but also how to embed a trauma-informed approach, acknowledging that people are at different levels in their stages of implementation. So it's really about where you're at from your organisation and where you're at from yourself as an understanding. And we were very conscious of that when we were developing the toolkit as well too, is to understand just the landscape of trauma-informed approaches within Northern Ireland and taking a lot of evidence, international evidence, but also bringing it back and how we make it Northern Ireland centric as well too. So this evening, today we'll be covering working together and evaluation and sustainability. I'm going to give a bit on and around the toolkit, and then Joanne is going to cover some of the examples. Joanne, do you want to introduce yourself before we start?
My name's Joanne Menaris. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist for children and young people in the Southern Trust as part of the Regional Trauma Network. And I was lucky to be involved in the Task and Finish group and developing the toolkit with the SBNI. So thank you for joining us on your lunch break. And we know that some people might need to rush off, but there will always be the recording available afterwards. And as we said, this is a whistle-stop tour. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into lots of detail, but we hopefully you walk away today with some helpful pointers and directions.
Excellent, thank you, Joanne. And after as well too, the implementation team is here to answer any of your questions as well too, should you need any follow-up after. But we do have resources that's online as well too through our website. So can we go to the next slides up? Very good, Alison, thank you. So as I said, we're going to be looking at working together and evaluation and sustainability as the two topic areas for today. So basically, first off, we will look at the working together. And whenever we're looking at that, if you looked at the Queen's research, it was cited as collaboration, but really it is about how we all work together to improve services, improve opportunities for people accessing our services. So what we have done is we've really drawn out from the international and the local evidence of how working together can make better outcomes for people, but also how organizations can improve their services. So we looked at it within the toolkit of looking at internal and external collaboration with people and looked at the development of how it has worked across sectors. And we have some evidence base within the toolkit that looks at collaboration between the likes of social services and CAMS teams. We have youth justice examples, and we have examples from Belfast Health Inclusion Trust. So basically what we're saying here is if you're working together, you're finding better collaboration across community and statutory sectors, and this can have better outcomes for people that is availing of our services, but also as well too is we need to ensure that people's voices are heard whenever we're designing and delivering services on the ground. So it's a full whole system approach when we're looking at collaboration, and this can go across the working within schools, working within healthcare systems, and it's about making sure that anybody that's coming under them services are having their voices heard, and that we are understanding where people are coming from. Within the monitoring and evaluation side of things, we have been the Queen's research identified 3 domains of development within implementing a trauma-informed approach, and them 3 domains were the organisational development, workforce development and staff support, service delivery and practice change. So the monitoring and evaluation was key to the domain 1, which is the organisational development. And basically what it is saying is for an organisation to develop and grow, we need to understand what we are doing, what services we're delivering, and how we are delivering them, how they're impacting people, and how they can make change for people on the ground as we move forward. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Alison? So the next slide is looking at the questions that we have within the toolkit. So as I said before, what we tried to do whenever we were looking at the toolkit is understand the current climate within Northern Ireland and really focus these questions on where we are as organisations. We didn't want to make these questions that were putting people off, and we didn't want to, but we wanted to get the organisations to get a true picture of where they were at. So we've got people to score them on the range of 1 to 5. Obviously 5 being fully embedded, trauma-informed fully embedded, and 1 being little or no inclination of trauma-informed approaches embedded in the organisation. And whether you score a 5 or a 1, it is not any kind of difference to the organisation. It's just a self-assessment to give the organisation a true picture of where they're at and where they can move forward or where they need more work on. So as you can see, some of the questions, we have kind of themed them in each of the focus areas. So we've looked at collaboration, service coordination, when working together, referral pathways and information sharing protocols developed between organizations and internally within organizations. And then again, we've looked at multidisciplinary approach Are you working within statutory and community organisations? Are you promoting a multidisciplinary approach within your organisation to promote working together? And have you got service users, carers, and others that access your service as part of the development and growth within your organisation? And again, that goes back to what we're all here to do, is to make sure that people that are accessing our services are getting the best possible service and best outcome for them. And again, that's really looking at time, place, appropriateness of services and how they are provided to people. So as we said before, you need the voice of the people there. We all need to be working together to have collaboration, and sometimes working together can scare people because we all have our own agendas. And Joanne and I, whenever we were preparing for this session, really looked at, even from a community perspective, and how that can be difficult whenever you're looking at funding and you're competing with your partners for funding. So it's how we come together and understand these relationships, understand where you're coming from your own organisation, and trying to achieve the best possible outcome for anybody that's accessing your services throughout. Alison, next slide, please. So within the next slide, it is looking at why do we apply a trauma-informed approach? So applying a trauma-informed approach is a benefit for people that is not only accessing services, but if for our commissioning, for our working together for a better society and workplaces that are understanding that we are a post-conflict society. We have in some way, shape, form or another all experienced trauma. So we are working with our partners, with our colleagues, understanding that we all kind of have suffered some type of trauma. So really we're some type traumatized, trying to provide a trauma-informed services for people. So it's about really understanding what that trauma is within your staff, within your organization. So we've identified the 4 R's, which is international evidence-based, of realizing the prevalence of trauma within your workforce and within your community and your organizations, recognizing the impact of trauma that it has had on people, and responding in a collective way, and then resisting re-traumatization. And these 4 R's should be applied across everything that we do. But also, if you have seen the first clog inside slide 2, we're really focusing on relationships, and that's key to the working together element within the toolkit. Is relationships really matter here. We really need to understand each other. We really need to have them conversations of where we're coming from as an organization, but where the people that we are providing services to are coming from. So it's about keeping these 4 R's in our forefront whenever we're trying to work in partnership and come together. So it's looking at who are the people we're benefiting, what are the organizations within the partnerships, and where have they come from, understanding the difficulties within their systems, understanding how their strengths as well too, and what they bring to the table, and then listening to the people that we need to provide services to, and making sure that we're designing and addressing services based on the needs of the collective of people that's coming on through our doors. And then also how the partnership works better together. So again, that's stripping back and saying, where's your strengths and weaknesses? What do you need to get from this partnership? And how do we make sure that we're providing that moving forward? So what we're saying is, if people work in a more collaborative approach, then you're making sure that there's a consistency in services that we're providing, so that if somebody is coming in to access health services or statute or social services, that they are being met with a common service provision, but also with the same type of language, the same type of respect that is across all services, to make sure that people are getting that consistency. Because whenever you are and looking for services, that can be sometimes stressful, and you can feel sometimes out of control. But if you know what you're walking under, or you know what the service you're going to be providing, then it'll help you heal it and provide a much better outcome for yourself. So on to the next slide, please. So Katie, what we were doing is we were looking at the working together, and communication was a big part of it whenever we looked at the QUB research. And basically what we're saying is, understanding a trauma-informed approach recognises the power in relationships and how relationships are built on connection and communication. And if we're working together effectively internally and across sectors, opportunities must be provided for all people's voices to be heard within the process. Working together can provide and enhance people's experiences of these services to ensure that they do our best to avoid re-traumatization. And the flip side of it, poor communication or breakdown in communication can distort people's providing services or people receiving services. For example, a lack of clarity around referral pathways or systems and procedures of information sharing. And some of the examples that we've got from organisations when we've been out and about doing the road shows was very much about when systems are clogged up and not having that. If victims and survivors are waiting on verdicts or waiting on decisions being made about payments or anything like that, there's not that continuation of communication with the person on receipt of the service. So it's about really tightening up what we've got, and we understand as well too, as we're working within a system, that sometimes our policies can restrict what we can and can't do. So truly understanding what the services that we're providing and what our policies permit and don't permit. So that can have a difficulty in trying to make sure that services are trauma informed. But again, how to address that is having that open and honest conversation with people, understanding where each side is coming from and putting and timelines and expectations across all the services we provide. And as we said, relationships matter, and how we communicate with people is especially significant in the importance of delivering a trauma informed service. Sometimes it can be anxious for people, and that can be if you're moving from child services to adult services. We want to make sure that there's a warm handover in place. And some parts of that, key parts of that warm handover is as the people involved in the decision making process, is the right organisations around the table to support that person. What type of structural change or what type of service change will that person experience if they move from child services to adult services? And then to make sure that we're supporting people to navigate through the system and understand what they expected at each point. So again, we're going to go on to communicating with staff and stakeholders. That is key and important for understanding where people are coming from and appropriate times of communication. So that can be across when you're looking at your internal. So within your internal support and understanding communication, you want to make sure that people are getting the appropriate development and training for the services that they provide. You don't want to be sending people out and for example, if there is a risky behavior, a risky situation, you don't want to be sending people out that are not equipped to deal with that situation. So you need to make sure that you're investing in your staff and that you're investing in their time to debrief and their time to communicate some of the challenges that they feel. So it's because they are providing the services for the people on the ground as well too. And then for those accessing services, again, it's about that opening the door, listening to people, not having a closed organization, be willing to put your neck out and change where it needs to change and be adaptive, and to make sure that the individual is accessing services that are appropriate to them. Because if we don't provide that service that is personalized, then people are just going to keep coming on through different services and accessing again and again. Where if you're there and you're providing the service that they need at the appropriate time, then it's beneficial and it's more cost effective and more cost savings. So then across departments, again, this is about shared learning and expertise. We know we are in a time of a climate that is under pressure. We are restricted with the resources that we have, from finance, the staff and staff moving across the different kind of professions. So there is a lot of staff burnout. So it's about understanding internally across departments and across organizations, what are the pressures? How can we all work together to alleviate the pressures and shift from that blame culture to a more supportive culture? And I think that really is about people sitting down, taking time, listening to each other, and really seeing where we can support each other in our strengths and weaknesses. And then externally, We are looking at that external partnership that works across the different departments and statutory organisations, communities. I come from a community sector, and part of what we had done is we had done a mapping exercise whenever we were doing a working together piece. And a lot of what we were doing was duplicating what the other organisation was doing. So what we sat back as managers and said, who's going to be taking the role and taking the lead in health, taking the lead in environment, taking the lead on poverty. So then we knew what organisation had their strengths, and we really faltered that under the development of a really secure community sector that knew how to refer, knew what to do when it came to different families experiencing different situations. So we had that there behind us. So it's about externally understanding each other and preparing what the future is going to hold for people, but also ensuring that there is a seamless referral pathway for people going across services. So next slide, please. And I'm going to pass on to Joanne.
Thank you, Aileen. So we're going to give you a little break from listening to the two of us for a few moments. We're going to show a video that hopefully sort of pulls all of this information together and why it's important. So thinking about how working together can create trauma-informed organisations. But often sometimes we hear ACEs and we think the Safeguarding Board, maybe because we associate that with children's services, but really what we want to demonstrate is this information and toolkit is applicable for all. We're all service users, and every one of us from cradle to grave will access the services, and our family members will be attending. So it's kind of thinking about the services that we would like to be offered as well. And this short animation covers what we might experience if we've had early trauma and how that can follow us through the lifespan, and how we in the workforce can maybe mitigate against some of the longer term impacts.
Today, children, we're going to learn about ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences, usually known as ACEs, are stressful experiences occurring during childhood that directly harm a child or affect the environment in which they live. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child spells out 54 rights that all children should have. One of the most important ones is you must be kept safe from harm and protected against violence and abuse. You must be given proper care by those looking after you. The home environment exerts a major influence on a child's development. When a child experiences sustained toxic stress within the home, this may have a profound impact on their health and well-being. Children can live with many adverse childhood experiences, like being shouted or sworn at, parents splitting up or getting divorced, being physically hurt, experiencing violence in the home, parents abusing alcohol and drugs, suffering from mental ill health, being sexually abused or assaulted, having a parent or sibling in prison, living with troubles or conflict-related trauma, being brought up in care. ACEs can be made worse by not having enough money, by discrimination, community conflict, or violence. ACEs can happen to anyone in any community. It is suggested that approximately 14% of people in Northern Ireland have experienced 4 or more ACEs. This doesn't just affect children now, it can impact on their future health. They are 4 times more likely to be a high-risk drinker, 6 times more likely to smoke cigarettes or use vapes, 11 times more likely to smoke cannabis, 16 times more likely to have used crack, cocaine or heroin, 20 times more likely to have been imprisoned in their lifetime, 4 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes, 3 times more likely to develop respiratory diseases, and 3 times more likely to develop coronary heart disease. Not again, Joe. Sit back down. What's wrong with you? 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 Wrong with you?
Oh, Joe, what's happened? Come on in. Would you like to sit down? Joe, you seem really upset and angry. I'm just wondering what's happened. It's okay. We can stay here and talk for a bit, if you'd like.
You don't want to know.
It might help to talk it out.
I hate my life. My mum and dad, they're always shouting, screaming, fighting and drinking. The neighbours called the police, but it just didn't get any better. My dad, he hates my mum, and sometimes he hates me too. Everyone hates me. No one wants to be friends with me. I can't bring anyone home. It's cold and dirty. My mum's always crying. There's nothing to eat, only drinks, so I'm always hungry. I get so angry, I just want to hit people. I can't stop myself. I can't sleep. Teachers keep on saying I'll get thrown out if I don't wise up.
It sounds like you're having such a hard time at home. I'm really glad you told me. How do you feel now?
I feel a wee bit better now that I've told you.
Let's see how we can make things better. We'll speak to the right people and we'll get help for you all.
Good morning, Joe. Are you ready for football later?
Whether you work in health, justice, social care, the community and voluntary sector, or in education.
Whoever you are,
Wherever you are, together, we can be the change.
Next slide, Alison, we can see some examples. So thinking back to the questionnaire that Aileen presented, these are some of the examples that we can think about in terms of meeting sort of the definition of working together, and some of the things that we can do within our own teams and services. So sort of thinking about promoting collaboration and shared learning via newsletters or social media, or developing collaboration and cross-sector partnerships, such as some of the research with the local universities, and partnership working with the Safeguarding Board, such as the Regional Trauma Network, which is a partnership between the Victims and Survivors Service and the Health Service. And also thinking about ensuring that there's timely and ongoing engagement with stakeholders and service users, and that could be through maybe offering consultations, having clear internal referral pathways and service information leaflets, and thinking about providing service users with support to access services, thinking about how that information is shared during staff handovers or at multidisciplinary team meetings, and trying to have that no wrong door approach. Now, many of these examples we're talking about here will be familiar to you and are examples of everyday common practices. But what we're wanting to think a little bit more about is that many of you are already working in a trauma-informed way. This isn't completely new, but also this helps us to think about the term trauma-informed and how that can then help us label how we are working and gives a framework. So if we move to the next slide. This is the 6 principles that we've been referring to. And one of the things to think about today is how do we ensure that our practices are trauma informed and to reduce the likelihood of any unintentional trauma response. And we can incorporate these 6 principles. And one of the examples we were going to think about is that concept of working together. And often we have that opportunity to do so during our team meetings. And that might be within teams, or that might be cross-sector or multidisciplinary teams. So maybe going away today and thinking about any small changes that we can make to improve team meetings within a trauma-informed lens. And it can be helpful to think about your meetings before, during them and after, and how you want people to feel when working in the organisation and using the services that we provide. And if we think about if we're holding in mind someone who's maybe had some heightened stress experience and how they might feel in the team meeting, how do we avoid traumatizing or re-triggering? So we're thinking about safety. People need to feel safe to share their experiences and insight. And we can do this by letting people know what the procedures will be. If, for example, there was going to be like a fire drill, we can mitigate anxiety by letting people know that there's no planned drills and this is where you go and where the exit points are. Maybe having the meeting in the same room offers some predictability and consistency. But that isn't just about the physical safety, it's also about the psychological safety, and thinking about someone who may have their psychological safety ruptured and maybe worried about their contributions in a meeting, that they may be rejected or ridiculed. So thinking about ways to address this might be thinking about ground rules and having very clear and shared understanding of the purposes of the meeting. So you can see how we can work through the different values of trustworthiness, being transparent, and can promote trust. So think about ways of delivering on that, how we share our notes, thinking about inclusion, how is everyone included in the meetings, or if they haven't been able to attend the meetings, are we sharing information in a multi-sensory way? And are we empowering all participants to participate, to learn from each other, and also think about giving people the choice over the time, over the agenda, and where the meetings are held. So I'll pass on to the next slide. Back over to Aileen.
So the next slide is we're starting off with the evaluation and sustainability focus area. So basically, we are looking here at a slide that is a sequential interception model. Oh, sorry, no, we're not. We're looking at the case studies from the Queen's Research. So basically what we have looked at here is the best practice within Queen's Research, and we identified 4 organisations that are already working in partnership together that has incorporated the listening of people that's accessing their services, but also about how services can work better together. So for example, with the Belfast Inclusion Health Service, they really assessed their approach of working with people from homeless population, and they were seeing how they weren't accessing everybody in that population in the city centre of Belfast. So what they had done in a trauma-informed approach was assess their services and seen and adapted to see how they can make sure that they're catering for everybody. So what they done then is took their services to the street rather than being in an actual physical office or centre, then they were putting their people on the streets to support people, and they found that increased service for the people on the street, but also ensure that they get access to health, any education, anything else that they need for support. Then Fane Street Primary School, they again took a whole review of the pupils and families that are coming onto their school. And basically, what they done is they done a wraparound service for any family or any young person coming in. And some of the young people and children that they see are coming from different communities and are new to Northern Ireland. So there was a lot of stuff on and around language barriers and that. So what they done was work with the trust, work with the education department, and work with EA to make sure that the services were there for people that were coming new to Northern Ireland as well. Salvation Army, basically what they done was they took an old trust building and they done it up under a family unit, and it was to provide family contact for people that had not got access to their children. So basically they provided a whole family home and wanted to create that experience of safety and comfort for anybody that was coming on to access their services. And what they had seen then was an increase in parenting skills with the services that they provided, and more families getting access to full-time parental responsibility of their children. So again, that increased the benefits for people accessing services. And then the last one we have here is Youth Justice Agency. And basically the key finding from themselves when they done an assessment of their services was that young people were waiting too long for CAM services. So basically what they done is they have a CAMS worker within each of their offices and their trusts and each trust, so that when young people needed that services that they had access to it straight away. So that's how you can see real partnership working, of sitting back and reflecting on what you have been doing within your services and making sure that services are appropriate for people on the ground as well too. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please, Alison? And we'll go on to the evaluation and sustainability focus areas, because I know you will be getting them notes out, so they'll be able to provide the SIMS model within the presentation. So the sustainability, evaluation sustainability focus area is very much based on, again, back to what we were saying for each of the questionnaires, and the toolkit was basing it on a Northern Ireland context and to make sure that organisations can answer questions in a way that's going to support their development and support the development of a trauma-informed approach. So basically what we're saying for the data collection is that, sorry, not the data collection, the evaluation and sustainability, is that organisations, although they're out there and they monitor and evaluate their services, it's really what are we doing with that information that we are collecting? Are we collecting the right information? Is it trauma informed? And how do we move that forward to make sure that we're learning and developing from what we have got? Because we have really, really good practices in Northern Ireland, and we want to make sure that they're getting out there and they're getting refunded for us to be able to provide services on the ground. So as you can see here, we kind of themed this based on what you're doing as an organisation in your data collection, who you're asking for the information from. Is it your service users? Is it your partners? Is it your staff feedback? And how you're asking for that information. So that is within the questionnaire and the focus areas. And again, we put it on the Northern Ireland basis. Alison, do we want to move on to the next slide, please? So again, this is looking at the importance of data collection. So as organisations, we realise we're restricted with the demands on our services and time constraints, but we really need to prioritise the evaluation and to support the sustainability of organisations and to support the sustainability of good practices that we've got. So what we need to do is understand the data that we're collecting, making sure that we're asking clear questions and that we have the principles of GDPR, and making sure that we're only asking the questions that we need. We need to allocate the time to analyze the data for the people accessing services, but also to make sure that the services are appropriate for them at the right time in the right place. But also we need to make sure that we have organisational growth and development and focusing on what we're actually doing to avoid service drift. And then we need to and part of this is also sitting back and celebrating what we have done and our achievements through the work that we're doing, because we're constantly on that firefighting basis, and we're not sitting back and we're not reflecting and we're not celebrating the milestones, the achievements from people that access our services, but also from the organisational perspective as well too. And then again, if we are true to ourselves with our evaluation, we're going to be enhancing partnership working. The leadership buy-in will be there because they're going to be seeing the benefits of what we're doing. And also it can help shape policy and practice. For example, evaluating services for one organisation, they looked at young people that they were providing services to. And some of the young people were coming in hungry and not able to focus on the services. So they looked at their policies then, and what their policies was restricting what they could do and what they could provide to people. So part of that evaluation then was addressing the policy restriction, but also then being able to provide the service for the young people coming on through the door. Next slide, please, Alison. So the next slide is based on the types of data collection that we use for continuous improvement. I'm not going to go through them all, but basically what I'm saying here is that we need to be opened and take every intervention or every contact that we have as a way of collecting data and making sure that we're shipping the services that we deliver and we provide for people. And again, as you can see, the Gantt charts are for organizational, baselines assessment are for people. So they come in and they all have their different resources and they all have their different tools that can be used for the different elements of your organization. I'm going to pass on to Joanne now for the examples. On to the next slide.
Thank you, Aileen. So this will just be a whistle-stop tour of some of the examples, but again, you can make contact through the SBNI for further information. So a lot of organisations can feel overwhelmed and unsure as to where to start. And we're hopeful that the trauma-informed toolkit will be a great starting point. And this is just an example of a couple of approaches that some organisations have taken. If you're interested in an external baseline evaluation and assessment, the trauma-informed Oregon approach was taken in partnership with the SBNI for the Probation Board, Youth Justice and the Southern Health and Social Care Trust. And another organisation called One Small Thing supported the Victims and Survivor Service in their evaluation. So as I said, these are external sources which give an overview of all of the areas of the organisation and provide a report following staff surveys, interviews with staff and focus groups and feedback from service users to provide a guide and a bit of a map as to areas which could be quick wins and small changes that we can make up to some of the larger projects, maybe looking at some of our policies and developments. And I think I'd be right in saying that all of the organisations listed here have developed trauma-informed implementation groups, may also be known as champions. And these are staff within the organisations who feel very passionate about trauma-informed approaches and ways of working and are supporting the delivery, education and training throughout their organisations. So we can move to the next slide, Alison. And again, you'll get a copy of this, but this is just an example of how we can support the trauma-informed whole system change, and that's through our feedback, listen to the voices of service users, collecting our outcomes, ensuring service users are involved in all areas of the organisation and service delivery and development, thinking about the training of our staff and across the board at all levels of the organisation. And it just, when I was thinking about and preparing about this, I was just thinking about the Encompass coming in across Northern Ireland, which will affect everyone in terms of bringing in whole system change and how we can think in our individual services about how we can support staff and service users while we go through this system change. And just finally, this is just some examples of the recent research that is Northern Ireland Pacific, an example of good cross-sector collaboration and helping us learn from the needs of the population how we can develop trauma-informed approaches and how they may benefit everyone in society. And all of these research articles are available on the SBNI website. So we just moved to the last slide. And I know we're running over time today, so if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or email to us later. I'll pass you over to Alison again.